Almonte's Key Food, proudly serving communities throughout Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island for over 30 years. When you shop Key Food, you'll always find fresh products, great weekly specials, and exceptional personalized service. Visit at any of their Key Food stores at 8235 153rd Avenue, Lindenwood, New York, 935 Rosedale Road, Valley Stream, New York, and 6620 Avenue U, Brooklyn, New York.
This DSA thing is real. It's on the rise. It is freaking people out. So much so that the Democrat Party is essentially saying nothing. They're going along with it. They may have no choice. If they had any integrity, they'd have something to say. We are joined now by the legendary political talent and strategist and master fashionista, if you will, Roger Stone. Roger Stone, I got to come up with a better word than fashionista. That's more feminine than masculine, but you wear great clothes and you wear them so well, and you got to go to rogerstonesuits.com because this is taking off, and it's going to be, I think you're going to be the next Ralph Lauren, Roger. I'm serious. How are you?
I'm doing great, Greg, and I agree with you about this sweeping change in the Democrat Party. It's abundantly clear that Chuck Schumer today is considered a dangerous right-winger among some elements in the Democrat Party. That's how far things have slipped. And this is very good news for the Republicans. It's not very good news for the country. I mean, I know this is also true of you. When I was growing up, both parties believed in God. Both parties were anti-communist. Both parties believed in capitalism. Both parties believed in free enterprise. Both parties believed in a strong national defense. The Democrats wanted to spend more. They wanted to tax more. Republicans wanted to spend less, tax less. But both parties were fundamentally pro-America. That is no longer the case. And we should have seen this coming when AOC defeated Congressman Joe Crowley, who was the chairman of the vaunted Queens Democrat organization when he got beat in the Democratic primary. That was kind of their first foothold victory. But now Mamdani and his allies, through the, I think, questionable legal shifting of money around between NGOs and nonprofit organizations and political parties, a lot of it, there's some formal complaints that have been filed against it, have taken control of the once great Democrat Party of Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Hugh Carey in New York. And it now demonstrates this victory in Colorado, also recent election in Washington, D.C., shows this is not limited to New York City or New York State. This is a nationwide phenomena. They are now the party of AOC and Ilhan Omar and that old windbag Bernie Sanders. That is the future of the Democrat Party. And from a Republican point of view, they're very beatable.
And it's interesting because this is the key moment for Democrats to do something about this, and they're not doing anything about it. I'm talking about the so-called mainstream Democrats. If you were going to really try to put this down, I guess now would be the time, and they're not, which shows me that they're scared and they're desperate and but they're still ambitious. So they are going to accommodate these people, and this will be the new Democrat Party because I've seen no substantive pushback to this. Have you?
No, and that's because they fear their Democrat primary voters. They realize that if they stand up and speak out against this, they will merely be swept away. So Kathy Hochul is a perfect example, perhaps the most unpopular governor in the United States based on a lot of polling that I'm looking at. But she's made her accommodation with Mamdani and he with her. If she had opposed him or spoken out against him, they would have run someone against her in the gubernatorial primary in New York, and she'd be toast. And she knows it. So these people are just kind of holding on, hoping, that the bear eats them last, which is, not a way to live, to be honest.
What do you say to the analysts? And I've heard some of them try to say, well, you got to look at this in perspective. Very low turnout in the summer. And these are already deep blue districts, right? So it doesn't really affect the mainstream. I don't agree with that analysis, but would you tell us why it's wrong.
Well, how do you explain what happened in Maine then, where a radical progressive ran the sitting governor out of the race? She got out of the race because the poll numbers, and this was before the summer, the poll numbers indicated she would have been defeated. I can't think of anywhere in the country where the Democratic Socialists cannot win. You can't point to any major victory this year where mainstream, what I like to call the corporate liberal Democrats, defeated someone from the progressive socialist, nay, Marxist wing. So they can continue to delude themselves that this is just an urban phenomena, exists in pockets of the country. I just don't think that's true. As it plays out, I think, by the way, it makes it more likely in the end that they nominate Kamala Harris as their candidate for 2028, because she's the one person who could conceivably keep the diminishing corporate liberal wing of the party and the radical progressive wing of the party in one tent. Because let's face it, when you get right down to it, she agrees with them.
Wow. That's fascinating. You know, one thing that would come in handy right now, integrity, and also, you know, President Trump, he gets criticized. You know, he'll call the reporter stupid to their face if they say something stupid, and he's not afraid to get booed. I remember he got booed at the debate in February 2016. Can't remember why exactly, but I think he was coming after George W. Bush. And I say this is important because if you can take the heat from your own party, and if you can shut down little things that are stupid, you'll be ready to shut down the big things that are stupid. And Chuck Schumer and the others, they can't cope with this because that muscle isn't exercised. It's not flexed. They've never flexed it before. You know what I mean? Not in this way. They're terrified of younger, passionate people of color. I think that has something to do with it as well. And it's kind of fascinating to watch, especially a guy like Schumer, who wrote a book about anti-Semitism last year, and in this moment is just going to let this crazy mob take over. I guess they have no choice. If you were Chuck Schumer, if you were advising Chuck Schumer, let's pretend Chuck Schumer said, you know what? I can't handle this. I gotta come out and do the right thing, and I gotta save my party. What would you advise him?
I would advise him to speak out and then announce that he wasn't running again. In all honesty, he's not going to speak out because he's trying to survive, in my opinion. And he may not be able to survive a Democrat primary. But what's more important right now is standing up to this extremism, standing up to the anti-Semitism, standing up to the Marxism, because that's what it is, because they just want to redistribute the wealth of the American people. Look, Chuck has had a long and illustrious career. He's come a long way from the state assembly. Is he more interested in the country, or is he more interested in his own personal survival politically?
It kind of blows out of the water. Not that he was wrong, but Richard Nixon, I believe, famously said, you know, to get the nomination, you run far left or you run far right, and then in the general, you run right back to the middle. And there's no sign that these DSA people are going to run to the middle. This is who they are, and this is how they're going to be.
No, I agree with that. I think they believe that they can sell their vision of America, but that's also because they cloak their vision. In other words, I think many young people, particularly, who voted for Mayor Mamdani, they voted for hope and change. They voted for broad platitudes about free this and free that without any real focus on what that meant in terms of governmental control of their private lives, their personal lives, government control over everything, whether it's free food because we're going to do away with grocery stores, or whether it's free health care, or whether it's ultimately free housing. We just froze rent, which if I were a landlord, I'd be petrified. How do I keep up my properties? How do I meet all of the regulatory requirements to make a property rentable if I have no funds to do that with? So I think they believe, just as Obama sold the people a bill of goods, that they can do it again, promising us vaguely we offer you the opposite of whatever Trump offers you, whatever that may be, without ever specifying exactly what that is.
Wow. All right. Well, good for the Republicans. You're sure about that? You're totally confident in that? I mean, that's what it looks like. But, you know, Mamdani, I heard he was going to be good for the Republicans, you know, the moment he was elected. And we haven't seen the payoff yet. Of course, we haven't seen the midterms. So just Republicans have to run against these people. And it's not any trickery. This is who they are now. And we just have to run on the issues, I guess. Is that right?
I think that's absolutely right. And to answer your question as to whether I'm sure, I'm absolutely sure.
All right. Well, good to know. Roger, you know that question, who are you wearing? From now on, you will be saying you're wearing Roger Stone. The RogerStoneSuits.com is, by the way, I'm almost at my fighting weight. Almost. I'm about 60% there, so I will be suiting up very, very soon. What is the key to a well-dressed man? General question, but what is the key to a man being considered well-dressed?
Always dressed appropriately for that activity in which you're about to engage. You wouldn't wear workout clothes to a clothing mall. You wouldn't wear a three-piece suit to a bowling alley or to the gym. Always be dressed exactly perfectly for that activity in which you're about to engage. Greg, we're very interested in suiting you up. As soon as you get down to fighting weight, we're going to give you a nice discount on a fabulous suit or sports jacket.
Well, I can't wait. And I got my eye on a couple. One more thing on this, you know, dress appropriately for the occasion. Almost any occasion you go to these days, people are now underdressed. I mean, there's like, you go to a wedding. You know what? I went to a wake and I couldn't believe people are wearing, you know, sweatshirts and that kind of thing. Where is the rule of thumb now? Because it's almost considered appropriate. I mean, do you have to go to like old times? Hey, what would be considered appropriate in 1980? Maybe we have to do a little bit of that, because anything goes in this environment. And sadly, I'd like to fix it. I'd like to help fix it. I think you're right, but you know what I mean? The standard has really changed.
The problem is that there are no standards. I mean, when I see people going to church in baggy shorts and flip-flops, my mother would never accept the idea of going to church on Sunday without a jacket and tie. For my dad, for myself, I mean, that's how people dressed in church. My father was a blue-collar guy. He owned one suit. He wore it to go to church. He wore it for weddings. He wore it for funerals. The only time he wore it. But the idea of going to church and not wearing it would have been out of the question. You go to a nice restaurant, a 5-star restaurant today, and I don't get to that many of them, but when I do, I see what people are wearing, and I find it very hard to believe. But there are no standards. You have to set your own standards.
I love it. And before we say goodbye, you knew Richard Nixon so well. You still have an amazing connection with that man in many ways. Here is Joe McCarthy, who I think has been rehabilitated to a certain degree and also vindicated. Elon Musk called attention to this tweet. And if you don't follow, folks, Elon Musk on X, you really should, because it's a lot of wisdom and a lot of interesting information he's coming up with. But do me a favor, Carlos. This is Joe McCarthy. I'm not exactly sure what year, but he's laying it down. Go ahead.
One communist on the faculty of one university is one communist too many. One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many. And even if there were only one communist in the State Department, even if there were only one communist in the State Department, there could still be one communist too many.
He sounds a little bit like Ted Cruz. I got two questions. What did Richard Nixon think of him? Because he had to deal with him quite a bit. And do you believe he has been vindicated somewhat?
I just wrote an extensive piece for Substack entitled "Joe McCarthy Was Right. These recent Democrat primaries prove it." Nixon and McCarthy had a complicated relationship. Nixon had to kind of mediate between the Eisenhower administration and McCarthy. But I think McCarthy considered him a friend and an ally. And, of course, it was Richard Nixon who exposed Alger Hiss, who was that communist in the State Department that Joe McCarthy refers to. And we know that to be a fact because when Soviet Russia fell and we had access to the KGB records, lo and behold, we found that Alger Hiss was a communist spy, and Richard Nixon was right.
So amazing. Richard Nixon. Wow. And Alger Hiss, he's got a couple of kids running around New York City. I think they're 80 now, but they also, my sense is, they lean heavily to the left. Well, Roger Stone, please, everybody, check out Roger Stone Suits. And what's coming up in store on the show next?
We're going to be talking about the very subject we hit on today, which is the Democrats' party's sharp shift to the left. That's tonight on the Stone Zone at 8 p.m. right there at 77 WABC.
We love it. Roger Stone, many thanks.
The Marine Toys for Tots foster care program is bringing hope to children who need it most. Every 2 minutes, a child enters foster care, often with only a small bag of belongings. More than 400,000 children face trauma and uncertainty, many before age 8. This May, during Foster Care Awareness Month, Toys for Tots is creating Room for Joy. In 2025, nearly 375,000 children received comfort through toys, books, and essentials, reminding them they are not alone. Donate now and change a child's life.